Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Board of County Commissioners budget meeting on this Wednesday, April 20, 2022. Gary, would you like to take the poll?
Yes, thank you,
please?
Chair Smith. So this is a meeting of the Clackamas County Budget Committee, which, as you all know, includes the 5 county commissioners and 5 public members from the community for a total of 10 members. We have 3 new public members today, so in a moment we'll have a chance for them to tell a little bit more about themselves. If we could quickly do introductions, and if we could start with Chair Smith and then move to your right, just please say your name and who you are or what department you are. Go that direction, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you. I'm Chair Tootie Smith, also Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you very much.
Wilda Parks, citizen member.
And staff too, Sandra
Sandra Montoya, Budget Manager.
and Jamie.
Jamie Karn, citizen member.
And Jamie, what's your background?
So I had the opportunity, and I actually say I had one of the best jobs in the world, so I just loved it. But I was a firefighter here in Clackamas. I worked for Clackamas Fire District 1 for 36 years.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for upping up your service again.
Thank you.
I'm Kenny Cernak, public member, and I'm a CPA at a local CPA firm. So been in Clackamas County for about 10 and a half years.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. James Rhodes, born and raised in Clackamas County. I recently retired after a 25-year career with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. I have a daughter who's 16. My family lives and works in Clackamas County. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for wanting to be on this committee today.
I'm Gary Schmidt, County Administrator and the Budget Officer for Clackamas County.
Tony Marnick, Clerk to the Board.
Commissioner Mark Shaw.
And Commissioner Sonia Fisher. Nice to see everyone.
If I may, Chair, so we are missing one public member, Jan Lee, who is not able to be here today. Commissioner Martha Schrader is not here today, but Commissioner Paul Savas will be here shortly. He's just delayed.
Great, okay, thank you.
I might add, if I may, that I've emailed back and forth with Jan Lee this morning.
Yes.
She's had knee surgery. She's still in hospital, but she hopes to get out tomorrow.
Oh,
So,
okay, well,
yeah,
good for her.
She'll be in great shape for our
Boy,
budget deliberation meetings later.
yeah, she'll probably be outperforming all of us with a new knee surgery.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Gary.
All right, next is approval of the January 19, 2022 minutes of the Budget Committee. There is a copy of the minutes in your packet, so seeking if you have any additions or changes or to approve those minutes, please.
Commissioners, do we have any comments on additions or changes to the meeting minutes from January 19? Our new members probably were not there then. Can they vote on this, Gary?
They can vote on that, yes?
Okay, good, wonderful. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 19.
I would so move.
Seconded.
Wilda Parks has moved approval of the January 19 meeting minutes, and Commissioner Shaw has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? Tony, would you please take the poll?
Yes, ma'am. Wilda Parks,
Yes.
Jamie Rhodes,
Yes.
James Karn,
Yes.
Kenneth Cernak,
Abstain.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion passes 6-0-1. Thank you very much. Gary, with the present members, what is required for approval?
Yes, so
What
you
is-
have 10 members, and that is the standard, whether all 10 are here or not.
Okay.
Therefore, 6 is both a quorum and a majority needed for any vote. 6.
Okay, thank you. And we have 7 presently. Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Gary.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Compensation Board of Elected Officials, their report and recommendation to you. This is an annual event. We have with us to present Heather Pedersen, who is the county's Classification and Compensation Manager, along with Alyssa Grandy, who is the chair, a community member chair of the Compensation Board of Elected Officials. There was a memo in your packet as well. So Elizabeth and Alyssa, please come on up.
Good to see you.
Go ahead. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you.
Are you on?
The mics are on.
Heather Pedersen, Clackamas County Compensation Board staff liaison, as well as the compensation manager for Clackamas County.
Hi, I'm Elisa Grandy. I am the chair of the board and have been on with the group for 4 years.
I believe we have a PowerPoint presentation, and if not, that's okay, but,
We can throw it up.
okay.
And so Tony is double booked right now, so if we can pause
Nope.
just a moment, and
Sure.
he'll set that up.
Thank you very much.
Tony, we can get that.
Teamwork. Thank you. So, good morning, commissioners and citizen members of the Budget Committee. Again, my name is Heather Pedersen. I'm the staff liaison to this compensation board for elected officials. Elisa Grandy, right next to me, served as chair this year on the compensation board, along with Melissa Fireside and Colleen Wilson, who are also members of the compensation board. And since we only do this once a year, and we do have new citizen members, I do want to describe to you the process that we go through every year. The compensation board for elected officials is guided by Oregon Revised Statute 204.112, which outlines the annual process for county compensation boards and gives these boards the authority to review the compensation of elected officials and make recommendations to this county's budget committee. The statute provides general guidelines and considerations regarding how the compensation board determines their recommendations, and including the review of comparable positions within the local labor market and consideration of factors such as internal alignment and compression. The ORS provides more specific direction related to the sheriff, which states that the sheriff's salary shall be fixed in an amount which is not less than that for any member of the sheriff's department. You may recall that last year in 2021, the compensation board did change their philosophy. Historically, they'd had a practice of interpreting that the sheriff's office guidelines as that the sheriff shall make at least $1 more per month than the highest paid sheriff's office, the undersheriff. And last year, the compensation board redefined what that looked like. And so what their decision was last year was to expand their definition of salary compression for all elected officials who oversee a county department. And they have recommended a 10% salary spread between those electeds that oversee a county department and their second in command. That is what the compensation board decided last year, and so that was what was their recommendations were based on. The methodology adopted by the county's compensation board included collecting market data from comparable jurisdictions and adjusting that data as appropriate. The labor market used by the compensation board includes Clark, Deschutes, Lane, Marion, Multnomah, and Washington counties, as well as the cities of Portland and Vancouver and Metro Regional. Like last year, the compensation board took a three-pronged approach to looking at their recommendations. This year, it began with recommending a cost of living increase. And so the cost of living increase recommended for all elected officials this year is equivalent to that which was budgeted and approved for the non-represented employees, as well as what the represented employees will receive who have current contracts and what's been proposed and budgeted in bargaining. The second prong with regard to their recommendations is for compression. And so they've recommended compression adjustments for 2 positions this year, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then the third consideration is whether market adjustments are necessary. This year, no market adjustments are necessary. There were some recommendations made last year that the Budget Committee did approve considerable market adjustments. And so this year, we did not have any elected officials who were below market. So that brings us to the Compensation Board's recommendations for 22-23. And as I mentioned, as outlined in the full budget, or the full report to the Budget Committee from the Compensation Board for elected officials, it's recommended that all elected officials for Clackamas County receive a 4.5% COLA. Again, that's the same cost of living increase that's recommended, or that the non-represented employees will receive, as well as those represented employees that have a current contract. And in addition, the Compensation Board is recommending salary adjustments for 2 elected positions, one being the sheriff and the other the treasurer. The sheriff is recommended to receive a 3.3% increase in addition to the cost of living increase. And that is to achieve that 10% spread between the highest paid undersheriff and the sheriff. Over the course of the last year, the undersheriff did receive a performance increase, a merit adjustment, and so that is prompting the Compensation Board to recommend an additional increase for the sheriff. The treasurer, also a 2.4% increase to maintain that 10% spread from the deputy treasurer. Again, there are no market adjustments recommended for this year.
Thank you, Heather. Before we get started on this, I'd like to remind the people sitting at the dais, if you'd like to speak, there's a button that you can press. Well, yeah, at the bottom, yeah, that toggle switch. If you want to speak, the members sitting down here, if you take your cards and just stand them up on the end. And then if I really miss you, start waving your hands, okay, as we go forward on this. I think what we're going to do, there's several new pieces on the compensation of elected officials, and I think we're going to take those in pieces today. Gary, you have a recommendation on how to proceed on this?
Yes, so I would recommend you first look at the cost of living proposal, which the 4.5% recommended cost of living is what most county employees are receiving as well, so discuss that first.
Okay.
And then second, discuss the 10% spread between the elected and their top deputy, if you approve of that.
Okay. Okay, I will now open up the discussion on the recommendation of 4.5 COLA increase for all elected officials. Mr. Scholl, you want to say something?
Yes. I'm concerned that the 4.5 COLA across the board for the county is unsustainable. And I also believe, first let me back up. I want to thank the board for your work and your recommendations. I'm not saying your judgment's wrong, but I believe that at this juncture in the budget for this county and the road ahead and the way it looks for the potential for a very stressed budget, I believe this is the time for elected officials to make a statement. And I believe that the 4.5 across the board COLA for elected officials should be reduced to something to send a message to the county that the elected officials are here to serve the county and that a lesser COLA is more appropriate to send that message. Does that make sense, Chair Smith?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does very much. Did I hear a recommendation from you? No.
Well, if you're ready for a motion on this,
Okay, you
I'd be
wanna
happy
make a
to give you
motion?
one, but you might
Okay.
want to have more discussion
Yes,
first?
I do want more discussion. I just heard a recommendation, but that's fine.
Okay.
Commissioner Savas? No. It's Wilda Parks, and you're Martha today. By the way, I would like to welcome Commissioner Savas, and on my little toggle panel here, we are playing musical chairs, and so the names that pop up, forgive me in advance if I mess up your name. Wilda Parks, you're up.
Maybe I speak on behalf of both.
Yes.
We don't always agree on this one, so.
I know. I appreciate Commissioner Scholl's considerations and comments on that, but I don't think that personally I would be able to support a lesser CPI. It's important that we send also a message that we value the work that our elected officials do. And I think that by compensating them to the degree that others have been compensated, and when you go out and try to buy a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk today, y'all know what I'm talking about, and don't even start on gasoline, So the entire increase is a few dollars less than, was it 100,000? And to me, that seems reasonable.
And when you say 100,000, you're talking about the 4.5 COLA increase and 2 salary increases for all of the county elected officials. I'm just
At this point,
clarifying,
yes.
yeah, what
Thank
that
you.
meant. Any other comments? Kenneth?
I just was going to ask, is it standard to have the COLA match the non-represented county employees and the represented employees on a current contract, or is that something that fluctuates from year to year?
I'm going to let the compensation board answer that. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Elisa Grandy. I am the chair of the board, citizen member. So the 4.5 COLA is, from the board's perspective, a hedge against that compression number. So every time a subordinate receives that increase, we then have to look at it for the elected official. And so that's just sort of the language we used is, well, if we've given 4.5 here, in order to maintain that 10% compression spread, we're going to then apply the 4.5% to the elected.
Okay. So you're concerned about that compression number. Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thank you. Well, some of you already heard this before, so it comes as no surprise, and some of you have not, so I'm going to say this for the benefit of everyone. I've always struggled with this one, and I won't really talk about my personal reasons for running for county commissioner, but it wasn't money. I'll just put it to you that way. I'm in my 25th year of public service, and I've been volunteering since 1997 in public service, and I didn't go in there with any hopes or dreams or aspirations that somehow it would be something that I would be compensated for. I thought it was something I would be giving back to the community. So I have a different opinion. While I do value the argument that, paying county commissioners or other elected officials a commensurate amount is an incentive to keep good people, I don't disagree with that per se. I do also want to thank the compensation board and all their efforts, and the volunteers themselves for this role. Is always challenging, but I have been firmly against the raising of the wages as it is, and I think that the flip side of the argument could be that by leading by example is that we are trying to maintain the biggest value and tax savings for the citizens as possible. We negotiate contracts. We do a number of things as county commissioners, and I think that it's hard to say or hold the line and at the same time, vote to give yourselves a salary increase. So I won't go into the long typical speech that I normally do, but that's the summarized version, as Wilda knows and others know. So I won't go through the greater dialogue of that, but I do want to thank the compensation board again for their work, and I've always been a firm no, so take that as no offense if I vote no on this particular item.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Mark, you're in the queue. And
Yes.
so is Commissioner Fisher.
Okay. I just wanted to say for the record, I have a concern about a situation where we have a department that gives a raise to an employee that then forces the budget committee to consider the need for compression adjustment. I just want to say that for the record.
Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. My first question to Gary is, has this been budgeted for, and is this in line with us having a sustainable budget?
It has not been budgeted for, pending your decision today. If you do approve this as recommended, the $99,859 total would come from the general fund. There is room in the general fund to accommodate if you approve this amount, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's always the first question that I have. So I don't look at this as being us as elected officials, but I see that it is the position that has the, and it's not a salary increase, it is a cost of living adjustment. And it's not about us individually, it's about the position. And we just saw in Clackamas County, we had 3 legislators that had to step out of serving in those roles because they could not afford the very low salary with needing to manage the balancing budgets and their needs of a family. I'm very concerned that in this country, elected officials are either supported by someone else or rich in order to serve. I don't want to be a part of that narrative. I think that elected officials should be able to support themselves with the work that they do. And these jobs, people say often, is this a full-time? And it's like, you know what, this is a whole lifestyle. This doesn't stop. Our county employees are on the clock for 4 days a week. We don't stop on the weekends. We don't stop in the evenings. We don't stop early morning. This is a lifestyle, 24 hours a day. It doesn't ever stop. And to think if we're going to have people in these positions that are able to commit the time necessary and to do the work, we need to be able to compensate them. Not extra, and this isn't a salary increase, this is just status quo. This is just not taking a step backwards.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Wilda Parks.
Yeah, thank you. Back to Commissioner, back to the question about, is it in the budget? I just want to make sure I'm understanding. This is actually for the budget year of 22-23. And so that would be in our budget that we adopt the end of May. And at that point, if we have whatever we've done for compensation of elected officials will be filtered into that draft budget. Am I correct in understanding
You are
that?
correct. So I've already submitted the proposed budget, so in my mind, I'm a step ahead of you all, but you're
okay.
correct, Wilda. Thank
Okay,
you. Yes.
thank you, thank you.
I will entertain a motion. Commissioner Scholl, you said you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, Chair Smith. In the spirit of compromise, I move that all elected officials in Clackamas County receive a 1.8 COLA for FY 22-23.
Do I hear a second? I'll second it for the purposes of discussion. Thank you, Commissioner Scholl. I will now open it up to discussion, and I will start. I appreciate Commissioner Fisher's comments, and you know a lot of what you say is very true. A lot of what you say is very true. We work all the time, but we know that when we run for office, what this job entails. And it's the spirit of public service. We're here to try to make a difference in the lives of our citizens of Clackamas County, not necessarily for enrichment. I will also say for those listening out there, every single elected official is in a 6-figure salary category with very generous benefits and other compensation available to them. We are not hurting. I don't think so. Regarding the Oregon legislature, I served in the Oregon legislature when I made $12,000 a year. Okay, you don't do that for enrichment either. And it's a little bit more now, maybe it's 25, 26,000, but the legislature is part-time. The people who serve in the legislature know that as well. And there is turnover in the legislature, and that gives opportunity for more people to run for the legislature. And the legislature is considering salary adjustments, but we are not the legislature. We're the Board of County Commissioners. We do work a lot. I think all of us who run for office who are sitting up here, I can speak for us, because we want to try to make a difference in the lives of citizens, and that's why we're here. So in that spirit, I today am voting no on all salary increases for all elected officials. Is there any further comment? Commissioner Scholl.
Again, my concern is that the road ahead for this county and most counties is going to become more austere in the future. And also, I believe that the 4.5 COLA is going to put us in a situation not too far down the road where we're going to have some more friction in balancing our budget. And finally, again, elected officials are elected to serve the people of this county, and I understand that our employees work to serve the people of the county. But the elected officials need to set an example, and I believe my motion would reflect that. Thank you.
Any further comments for the motion on the table? Kenneth?
I have a question. How did you come up with the 1.8?
1.8 is what we got last year, and it's just a compromise number.
Okay.
It's not based on any kind of actual calculation, but I believe that it represents a spirit of compromise for the purpose of this motion this morning.
Wilda Parks?
Yeah, thank you. I just feel the need to reiterate that that I would not support the 1.8. I would support the 4.5. And when you consider the kind of work that our elected officials do, quite frankly, I think the value is there. Like Commissioner Shull, I have some issues with the other part of the compensation package, which we'll discuss after we finish this section of it. But if there were not a motion on the table to do the 1.8, I would be making a motion for the 4.5. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Wilda. Any further discussion on the current motion on the table? Seeing none, Tony, please take the poll.
Yes, ma'am. Wilda Parks,
No.
James Rhodes,
Yes.
Jamie Carn,
Yes.
Kenneth Cernak,
Yes.
Commissioner Schull,
Yes.
Commissioner Savas,
No?
Commissioner Fisher,
No.
Chair Smith.
No. The motion is tied, therefore it fails. Correct, Gary?
It is 5-3, and you do not have a quorum, you don't have a majority of 6, so it
Now, wait a
fails.
minute. No.
5, 6, 7,
I
8.
think it's tied at
We have
4-4.
9 people here now.
Oh, 1, 2, 3.
No, you're missing Commissioner Schrader and Jan Lee, so
Oh,
two
that's
of
right.
the 10 are missing. There's 8 total.
8. And I believe it was,
What'd you get?
It takes 6 to carry, though.
3.
it takes 6 to
4,
carry.
4?
I believe it's tied.
I apologize. I count 5-3, he counts 4-4. The clerk rules, so it's 4-4, tie. It's still not a threshold of 6, which means it
Right.
fails.
And I just said my number was tied, so therefore motions that are tied vote fail. So, Commissioner Wilda Parks.
No, thank you. Budget chair is good enough.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. With our very recent action, I would then put a motion on the table to accept the 4.5 cost of living increase across the board for elected officials.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made by Wilda Parks to approve the 4.5 COLA with a budget roll-up cost of $99,859. That is not accurate because we are not considering the 2 salary increases. So I'm going to strike that. It's just a 4.5, seconded by Commissioner Fisher. Do we have further discussion? Seeing none. Tony, please call the poll.
Wilda Parks,
Yes.
James Rhodes,
No.
Jamie Carn,
No.
Kenneth Cernak,
No.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Schull,
No.
Commissioner Savas,
No.
Chair Smith.
No. Motion fails. 5-2, is that correct?
Yes.
Tony, what'd you count?
Chair Smith, I have 6-8 in the negative. Or,
I
I'm sorry,
mean, 6.
6-2 in the negative.
I also counted
6.
6-2.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's 6-2.
So if it's 6, then it's
So the motion failed. There was a majority
Motion
of the
failed.
motion. The noes have it, the motion
Noes
fails.
have it, 6-2. Okay,
Chair, I move that we move forward with a 0% increase in salaries,
is that
or in
necessary?
COLAs.
I don't know, is it?
Is that necessary?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, yeah, you need to make some action. Well, if you take no action, nothing happens. So you could take no action, or you could make a statement. The answer is 0.
Okay, Commissioner Savas, I'll entertain your motion.
Chair, I move that we move forward today on make a decision with 0 COLA increases.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Savas has made a motion for 0% increases for all elected officials. It's seconded by Kenneth Cernock. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Tony, call the poll.
Yes, ma'am. Wilda Parks,
No.
James Rhodes,
Yes.
Jamie Carn,
Yes.
Kenneth Cernock,
No.
Commissioner Fisher,
No.
Commissioner Savas,
No. Yes.
Yes.
I got myself backwards.
Right. I know, it's confusing.
Commissioner Scholl,
Yes.
Chair Smith.
Yes.
Chair Smith, I have 5-3. The motion should carry.
Yes, that's my number 2.
It
Thank
does
you
not
very
carry
much.
because you don't have 6.
Oh, that's right, we don't have 6.
Point of order.
Yes, Commissioner Scholl.
Could somebody clarify the fact that we have 2 members of the Budget Committee gone, and we're still requiring a 6 vote to carry a motion? I don't understand.
He explained that
Well,
earlier.
could you explain it again,
That is
please?
within your bylaws that was approved for the Budget Committee way back when, that a majority is 50% plus 1 of the entire membership of the board, whether they are present or not. So you must have 6 members present to conduct business and 6 to approve any items out of 10, whether, even if only 4 of you showed up, 6 of you showed up. So that's in your bylaws of the Budget Committee.
And we just had a 5-3 vote?
Right, and so, but you need a majority,
Yeah,
which is,
we need a majority of the
10 member.
appointed members, which is 6. Thank you.
a majority of the 10, of the full committee is 10, you need a majority of the full committee, even if not all committee members are present.
Okay, Willa Parks. I turned it off, so you don't have
Oh,
to.
thank you. Yeah. I'll get used to that. So in my memory of the years so far that I've been sitting on the Budget Committee, we've not had this type of situation happen. But also, I'm wondering, in all fairness, if we continue, so set aside the issue of the COLA at this point, continue the discussion about the compression, but hold the percentage, the COLA part, until the budget deliberations in May, which is historically what we've done. I know we're trying to get a head on it so that we can do a draft budget and so on, but you still do a draft budget with the amounts in there if you would be like the highest to the lowest. It would just seem to me that after, is it 3 or 4 now, failed votes, that we may not be able to reach an actual majority today.
Gary, and to piggyback what you're saying, the vote that's taken today is just a recommendation from when we meet the Budget Committee at the end of May, correct?
If you were to make a decision today, we would plug the numbers into the proposed budget that you would have in May, which then you could always change it there as well. The reason we pulled it out in the years past is so we could put it in the proposed budget that you'll receive for May. But yes, you can make no decision today, you can make a decision and then reverse it again at your May committee meetings. And the Board of County Commissioners, when you get this in June, you can reverse what the Budget Committee does. So there's plenty of off-ramps here until the very end.
Okay. Well, has your answer, do you have an answer?
I would make a motion that we hold this off until our budget deliberations in May,
When all members are present?
when all members are present.
Wilda Parks has made a motion to hold off all deliberations on the COLA
Yes, thank you.
increase until our official budget meetings at the end of May when all budget members are present. Do I hear a second? Okay,
Seconded.
and Commissioner Scholl has seconded that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Tony, would you please call the poll?
Wilda Parks,
Yes.
James Rhodes,
Yes.
Jamie Carn,
Yes.
Kenneth Cernock,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. Motion passes unanimous. Holy moly. Okey dokey.
We
So-
can't agree, we can't agree.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to agree in probably, 96% of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, the second part of this discussion, Gary, it has to do with a 10% recommendation to avoid a compression issue. Is it 2 of our elected officials?
On your proposed, the compensation board is recommending for 2. Correct me, it's required for 1, it's required for the sheriff by state law, but it is not required for the others, is that correct?
The requirement for the sheriff is that the sheriff be paid more than any member of the sheriff's department.
10% or by $1?
No. It doesn't say.
Oh.
It just says
Forgive me,
more
so it is
than.
not required the 10% for either.
And it's not required of $1. It just happens to
Correct.
be $1.
Well, it no longer is $1, but prior to last year, the compensation board had interpreted the ORS to be $1 more per month.
And now you're interpreting that differently, that particular ORS. You're interpreting that. How long has that ORS been on the books, Stephen Madcore?
I'd have to look it up, Chair. I don't know, for a long period of time now.
Probably decades. Okay, I'm just throwing that number out. It's probably been decades. I find it interesting. Now, your interpretation came from an attorney on the compensation board? No, you just decide. Okay, whatever. Yes.
As human resource professionals, we utilized what we've used in the private sector, which generally has an approximate 10% minimum spread between any leader and their next in line subordinate.
Okay, all righty. Commissioner Savas?
Never mind, got my question answered.
Oh, okay, good. So, further discussion. Now what about the treasurer? How does that increase work?
The only elected official that is called out in the ORS is the sheriff. And so the treasurer the compensation board last year just made the decision and recommendation that any elected official that runs a county department should make at least 10% more than their second in command.
And
So there's no RS that says that.
Correct, I know, you sent the 10%, I understand that, because the treasurer's situation is obviously same as the sheriff's situation, where those number 1s and number 2s salaries are close together, and you're recommending a 10% spread between each. Thank you for the clarification on that. Mr. Simon?
I think my question's been answered.
Okay, and then we have Wilda Parks.
Yeah, thank you. If we begin this change, then what happens also as we move forward and elected members, second in commands, continue to have raises? Might there also be more elected officials that will need the 10% because we've established it as a precedent? Or, how would that, I've always thought it was kind of strange, quite frankly, that the sheriff's salary and second in command were so close together that $1 separated them. I will say that doesn't mean I'm in favor of giving them 10% differential. So I'm really compromised with that.
Thank you, Wilda. Commissioner Scholl?
I'm concerned that a department head or an elected official who gives a raise to the second highest paid person in that department, by default gives himself a raise also. And there's something repugnant about that ability. Yes.
I guess I'd like to speak to that. So the employees who report to the elected officials are just that. They're employees of the county. And so their compensation, they're assigned to a classification, and the compensation is determined by the county administrator. So my department, classification and compensation, conducts market studies and recommends appropriate salary grades for all classifications, including these second in commands, and makes recommendations to the county administrator. So ultimately, the compensation plans are administered by HR with the approval of the county administrator. So what you're seeing in relation to, say, the sheriff, is that the undersheriffs receive annual merit increases. This isn't something that the sheriff selects to do, but all employees are eligible for merit increases annually until they reach the top of the grade. So it's not as if the sheriff increased the salary of this particular employee. It's something that happens to all employees annually.
Okay.
Gary?
Yes, if I may give my opinion for your consideration, I'm concerned with this 10% spread because it puts pressure on me, because I make the decisions of any employee, including these employees of the elected officials, if they get an exceptional merit beyond the normal merit, if they get a bonus, if they get a reclassification. And I will tell you, with all transparency, I recently did make changes to the undersheriff and the deputy treasurer. So it is because of my actions, you are now facing this decision today. And I have to say, this does put a chilling effect on future decisions I will make, knowing of this 10% spread.
That's right.
Thank you.
And, merit, somebody is performing very, very well. And it's up to Gary, to give them, because we have some really high-performing employees at Clackamas County. That's not what is at issue today. I want to be really clear on that. So because they get a bonus or a merit for that, and then that automatically raises their boss's salary, I too, Commissioner Scholl, have issue with that. We have a couple more folks in the, Kenneth, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple questions. One, this 10%, that's just what you're using for your recommendations, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then the second question I have is, would it be feasible to do the spread based off the top instead of what an employee is currently paid, so that it would remove that chilling effect on the administrator? Because then it's not based on what the current employee is making, but rather what their potential to make is. That, just a question.
So are you, if I understand the question correctly, the 10% would be 10% above the maximum of?
Not necessarily 10%. I mean, you guys are picking, right, but you could base the spread off of that, and then it would, it would lead to higher salaries, I assume. But it would remove any implications of changing pay for that second in command.
It would do that.
Okay.
Initially, however, as you suggest, it would actually lead to larger increases.
Yes, and then it would still obviously have increases based on if the pay range increases, but it would at least remove that aspect of it.
Okay, thank you. Jamie Carn.
That answered a good portion of my question, too. Out of curiosity, how many step increases are there for employees, not the administrator of the division, but other 6, 7, 8?
Well, it depends on if it's a bargaining unit within the Peace Officers Association, our AFSCME, CCOM, which covers our dispatchers, and our FAPO, probation and parole officers, are on a pay plan that has 6 steps, and they're approximately 5% apart from each step. The rest of our unions, as well as our non-represented employees, are not on steps, so they are eligible to receive 3.5% merit increases annually until they reach the top of the grade.
And so merit increases, those would be separate from COLA?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That answers.
Yep, you bet. Commissioner Savas.
Well, I know in the private sector, which I spent most of my life, if we had a good year, I was more generous when it came to increases in salary or pay or whatnot. And if we'd had poor years, and I obviously had to have tighten the belt quite a bit. One thing, just to put all things in perspective so that anyone watching or listening kind of understands, and that is that I struggle, and that's why I raise the public sector. If I had a good year. In the public sector, we are on a state 3% maximum increase in property values, which is our base. And then with new development adding on, we live on roughly 3.25% to 4.2% annual increase in revenue that we run the general fund on. And some of these things, like the elected officials are paid, most all elected officials are paid with general fund, not all. And there's some that are fee-based, like water environmental services, and also DTD has some fees that some positions are funded by, and some state positions that are funded. So all to say that it's very difficult to factor in numbers like 10% or arbitrarily pick a number like 10% or 4.5% when that exceeds what our annual revenue increase is, and knowing that also that a portion of the salary is also on the roll-ups, all the benefits in the benefit package. So all that combined has a significant impact on our ability to serve the people who we are here to serve. So I think that just kind of stresses and has this compression of its own sorts. So that's why I struggle. I just want to just put that out there because I'm not really sure that it's always nice to talk about increases, and that's nice and rosy, but our tax base isn't moving at that rate.
Yep, good points, Commissioner Savas. Gary, any further comments before we entertain a motion on this? No. Okay. I will entertain a motion not to approve the 10% compensation increase.
Second, for sake of discussion.
Okay. Will, do you make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion, or well, second yours, or Paul seconded it, whatever, but, and I had a question in my.
Yeah. May I state the motion
Yeah.
first, and then you can comment? May I state the motion? Willa Parks has made the motion not to support the 10% compression increase, and Commissioner Savas has seconded the motion.
Yes, thank you. And my question along with that would be, so what happens to compression? Do we go back to stay with the system we've had, where it involves only the sheriff and it's $1 a year differential, or do we look at a different percentage point for all, any elected official? This year it happens to be 2. I was very interested in what Commissioner Savas had to say, and I think he makes a very, very strong point about how our general fund increases only by 3 to 3.5% annually, and yet we're asking for higher increases in a variety of other things. So,
well, what we can do is we can vote on this motion, and then we can have more discussion on ruling that on if we want to make any further adjustments to that.
Right.
Or make a motion just to go back to what it was.
Yeah, because the motion on the floor doesn't provide for what we
know.
do instead.
That's correct. I think
So
we need to take
that's my
it piece
concern.
by piece.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
it will be easier to understand, correct, Gary?
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher?
So I really like that we have a compensation board of professionals that really look at this. And I'm not quite sure where I know we've talked around it, but I'm still fuzzy in my brain as to where the 10% came from and where that rationale.
There's no hard and fast formula, if that's what you're looking for, and I can absolutely understand why you would be looking for that. We were looking for that too. We did extensive research, Heather did as well, and we couldn't find a specific rationale for what that spread should be. But what we did look at was across industries, what is typical. And so we took typical increases, typical differentials, which we found to be 10%.
And was that, you said private sector?
It was, yes.
So it wasn't public sector?
It's not.
Do we have any idea what the public sector view is on this across jurisdictions?
Well, within the county, we typically do have, if you have a manager and a supervisor, there is typically a 10 to 15% spread. It's based on the level of responsibility that each higher level manager than director has. So it depends on the market, it depends on the work that they're doing, it depends on the department, but we do typically see that.
So I would be interested to know, like, what's the Multnomah County Sheriff, who's an elected official who also has a first in command? What's the spread there? We have, like in Multnomah County, the chair of Multnomah County has a lot of administrative duties, unlike Clackamas County. What's the spread between the elected chair of Multnomah County and their COO, Chief Operating Officer? I don't feel like I have enough information to really understand where this 10% came. I don't know if we could get more information and look at it later. And I would be really, we have an expert here. We have James Rhodes, who has a public safety, how many years did you say?
25.
25 years. And so you would, not understanding necessarily the practical implications of what this means for operations, I would feel like I would need that too. We want to make sure that there's good command and respect, and that we ensure that our decisions do that. And I just don't know that we have enough information.
Well, I think there's a motion on the table. We can vote that up or down, and then I think we can give instruction, like you say, more information for the next budget meeting. And first, let's entertain this motion, then I'm going to make a recommendation after this. Any more further discussion on the motion on the table? Yes.
Chair Smith, on this motion, could you clarify what a yes vote does?
A yes vote denies the 10% increase to elected officials when compression is in effect.
Good.
Okay, good question.
You meant the sheriff.
Well, it's anybody. We have two of them. We have a treasurer and we have the sheriff today.
Can I ask a quick
Yes,
question?
Heather.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you don't agree necessarily with the philosophy of the compensation board with the 10% spread?
Correct.
Okay, because annually, they're charged with making recommendations to this budget committee.
Yes.
The budget committee can deny, they can approve, or they can change a recommendation. So I just want to just make that clear that
Oh, I know.
that they're making recommendations, and I'm sure they will, that Elisa, and if the others are watching, they will take this discussion and consider it when they make recommendations next year as well.
Absolutely. And we have a motion on the table. Kenneth?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, is the motion to deny the two, or to not approve the recommendations for these two raises, or to change guidance to?
No,
Okay.
we are not changing guidance. Tony, would you please state the motion?
Ma'am, as I understand the motion is not to approve the 10% spread for elected officials between their second in command, which in this case would deny the salary increases for the sheriff and the treasurer.
Okay, so a yes vote would deny the 10% increase, correct?
That is my understanding, ma'am.
It denies the philosophy recommendation from the Budget Committee. You're not giving 10% increases to the sheriff or the treasurer, but to cover the 10% spread, the proposal is the sheriff gets a 3.3% increase and the treasurer gets a 2.4 increase. I know this is very complicated, but your original motion is you're
Do we want to amend the motion?
My advice, Chair, is don't amend the motion, vote on the motion as is, and then your next discussion is what to do about the two increases for the sheriff
Okay.
and the treasurer.
Wilda Parks?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that I had made the motion thinking it's got to be two parts, because we were
Yes.
not addressing what happens if
Yes.
we don't approve the 10%. So
Yes.
I am fine with leaving the motion on the table as it is, and then proceeding with step 2 after we have this vote.
Yes, we'll proceed with step 2, thank you. Commissioner Fisher?
I'm so sorry, but now I am so confused. I don't
Okay.
know what's on the table.
Okay, let me restate.
Thank you, Chair.
Tony, state the motion.
Ma'am, as I understand the motion is not to approve the 10% spread between elected officials and their second in command.
So a yes vote would support that philosophy.
Right,
Yes.
yes vote is.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
That's clearer, thank you.
you bet. All right. I'm going to call for a vote.
Yes, ma'am. Wilda Parks.
Yes.
Commissioner Savas.
Clarification, point of order. Motion is not to adopt the 10% yardstick. I'm going to call it that.
Correct.
Correct.
So the vote is not to approve, so the answer is yes.
Point of clarification, Commissioner, your yes vote is that you are opposed to the 10% spread.
Correct.
Thank you, Commissioner. James Rhodes.
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher.
Abstain.
Jamie Carn,
Yes.
Commissioner Schrull,
Yes.
Kenneth Serbach, Cernak,
Thank you. Abstain.
Chair Smith.
Yes.
Chair Smith, my vote is 6 yes, 2 abstain.
Yes, and the motion carries not to adopt the philosophy of 10%. Now, I will open it up for discussion for anybody who wants to make a recommendation, or Commissioner Salas.
Yeah, mine is not a recommendation, but in regard to the sheriff, and this has nothing to do with the current sheriff or the past sheriff, but there have been times where the commission has been pressured to take some kind of action, which is really under the authority and the auspices of the sheriff as elected official. So in a way, I'm sitting here today kind of wondering, geez, if we have a mechanism in which we were to evaluate or somehow use market conditions to evaluate the salary of the sheriff in and of itself, independent of the second in command, as a factor into this. I don't know if I'm circumventing or that would circumvent, and again, it's not a motion, but that circumvents the role of the compensation board here in this case. But it just seems to me that that could be perhaps a mechanism to say, geez, everything's in the sheriff's office is going wonderful, or the policies are such, and we endorse that. I just wonder if that's a tool that we would currently could probably perhaps utilize in situations like this. This is why I supported the 10%, by the way, or not approving the 10% yardstick.
Correct. Correct. You would like a different measure. Is that what you're saying?
Well, a factor.
A factor, yes, which is a measure, sure, okay. Will, you have any comments?
I've been sitting here thinking, is there some other percentage point we might use? Do we go back right now to just the old way, $1 difference? But I appreciate also what Commissioner Savas had to say, and I know in my working world, when I was doing that, I always took into account how people did in their job and what their potential was for the future, and so on and so forth. So a factor that helps us determine that with whether it's the sheriff or other elected officials. And at the same time, it's my understanding and my recollection that the only one we've dealt with in this way in the past has been the sheriff, and it's always been $1, that they had to receive at least $1 more than their second in command. And I always, like I said earlier, I always questioned that. I thought, it just doesn't seem comparable to anything. So I wonder if there's some other percentage point we might use, or if we just for now, just continue with the same policy that we've been using in the past, and it's applied only to the sheriff. I don't know, but I like the idea of some sort of factor of.
We could ask the compensation board to, as Commissioner Fisher recommended, what are they doing in Multnomah County? Multnomah County really isn't our best comparable, but pick some counties. Marion County, Clark County, Washington are probably closest to us, but we do share a border with Multnomah and Washington. So I don't know that today that we can make that determination. We might want to leave this for the Budget Committee hearings, and if you want to do some research for us, you've heard this discussion, and I think you understand where we're at on it. I would like to have that information presented to us, however, 1 week before budget deliberations, so everybody can read it and understand it and have in their mind what they might want to do and what the comments would be on that. Kenneth?
I was also wondering if it might be possible to get information on the current spread for each of the elected positions, and what the spread is based on the top potential pay.
I'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank you.
James Carn.
Thank you. A question for you guys would be, in part of that philosophy and coming up with that spread too, I know that a lot of times you need to incentivize. Why would somebody want to run for sheriff and not just be the undersheriff if you're going to make basically the same amount of money. Is that something that was calculated or thought about?
That was actually the basis of the initial discussion that we had, which is how do you recruit and motivate and retain high-quality people when there are vacancies, when there are retirements. We've had some retirements recently. And for all elected officials, knowing that you are taking on this huge responsibility, sheriff is a great example, right, to do the job of the sheriff and have your salary tied so closely to your undersheriff without any difference whatsoever.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. And, you know, we do appreciate you looking at that, absolutely. Commissioner Fisher.
So I'm just curious, the numbers here that are recommended, was it purely recommended because you were wanting to get to the 10% spread philosophy?
That was the application that we used, yes.
Okay, so then when we look at this, since we're not doing a 10% spread, what would be the other methodologies that you would use to make recommendations? Would it be to look at surrounding jurisdictions?
Yes, and that is what we do. So if you look at our three-pronged approach, because the compression component likely would make the other two components moot, that we started with the compression. So in the absence of compression, we would then want to make sure that we looked at market comparators and then obviously the COLA, which we aren't discussing. So we started with COLA. If we're not doing COLA, that would drive compression. If we're not doing compression, then we would apply the market.
Okay, so what I'm interested in, especially when it comes to public safety, whether it's district attorney or the sheriff, that we have a competitive compensation package. Now, of course, our Clackamas County Sheriff isn't going to run for sheriff in Multnomah County, but that doesn't mean that our Clackamas County Sheriff wouldn't take another leadership position, maybe with the state or with other FBI or other jurisdictions. So making sure that the compensation is competitive is critically important for us to attract the most quality candidates to run for these positions.
Okay, what I'm going to do today as chair, we're going to end the discussion today on this particular topic. I believe the Compensation Board has their marching orders, so to speak, on information. We have a lot of budget considerations left today. We haven't even started talking about the meat of this budget. Commissioners, we have allotted 1 hour for this. Are you able to stay until the noon hour to finish this meeting today?
Yes.
Okay.
Doctor's appointment.
Okay.
11:30.
Okay, a member is going to have to leave because of a scheduling conflict. That is okay. I think we can continue with the rest of the budget presentation today. Gary, are we taking any votes, or is this just an information session only?
There's one more vote on the next item, but the rest of the items today are information.
And what is that vote?
It is to select a member of the Budget Committee to serve on the county's audit
Okay, let's
committee.
go ahead and do that. Can you do that, Commissioner Fisher? We'll just a quick vote on that.
Yeah, I can vote.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Wilda.
Yeah, just to put a motion on the table and have discussion, should there be any, I would like to move that the Budget Committee appoint Ken Cernak as the Audit Committee member from this group.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Wilda Parks has made a motion that Kenneth Cernak serve on our Internal Audit Committee. Commissioner Fisher has seconded that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Tony, would you please call the poll?
Yes, ma'am. Wilda Parks,
Yes?
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
James Rhodes,
Yes.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Jamie Carn,
Yes.
Commissioner Scholl,
Aye.
Ken Cernak,
I'll abstain.
We should have asked if you wanted the position.
Wilda did before.
I've already
making me-
talked to her.
Okay, I
I
assume.
just don't feel comfortable voting on that myself.
All right.
Chair Smith,
Aye. Motion passes. 7 and 1 abstention, correct?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, there you go. Welcome. We look forward
Thank
to
you,
seeing
Ken.
you. I think our next meeting is Monday. All right.
Oh, didn't know it was that quick.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Gary, what's up next?
Thank you. Quickly, if I may go back, so on the compensation board recommendations, we're putting all of this to the May Budget Committee meeting. You'll revisit this there. So we'll bring this all back to you there for your further discussion, just to wrap the bow on that one.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
I believe Chair Smith also mentioned that it would be great to have that information at least a week prior to the budget
absolutely.
deliberation. So that would be somewhere around the
Absolutely, yes.
19th or 20th of May.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You
All
betcha.
right, next on the agenda is a update of a review of the general fund forecast for fiscal years 2022-23 through fiscal year 49-50, 30 years in advance. So Elizabeth or Sandra, please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, and thank you very much. I know this is a little bit longer than we planned, but we appreciate you sticking with us. I'm going to just do a little bit of background, recognizing the time constraint that we have, but also recognizing that we have 3 new members. So with that, I'm going to ask Blaze to throw up the slide so that we can walk through it together. And so for the new members, the forecast is for the general fund only. So the general fund is the granddaddy of the funds, and that is where we receive property tax revenue and state shared revenue. So that is available for distribution to all county departments at the discretion of the board. And so as Budget Committee members, you have the ability to make recommendations and advance those with a vote of the committee. So with that, we're going to, give me 1 second. And take off my glasses because now I'm looking up at the screen. So with that, what we do is we throw in historicals to tell us the trends for the future. We also look at all of the economics that are going on in terms of like property tax. We know that it grows at a 3% by state law, but also as new construction comes in, we know that there is a growth factor that we can apply. The growth factor that we have applied for property tax is 4.1%. That includes the 3% growth plus some amount for new construction, but it also includes, I want to say it's like 3.7% for delinquencies and discounts. So we calculate all of those things in, we plug them into the forecast, and then for the remainder of the revenue, we look at the trends of the past with knowledge of things that are coming up in the future. So much like we would do in our own home budget, we take all of those things into account and we churn them into the forecast. So the operating revenue, and I should say for the rest of the Budget Committee, we did an orientation for the 3 new members yesterday and gave them some background, as much as we could within an hour, as to the flow of these meetings, their role, and also just a touch on the forecast that they would be seeing. So in some of these things, I'm going to move forward at a faster pace, recognizing that we've already touched on some of these background training. So operating revenue is any revenue that comes into all of the departments that belong to the general fund. And we have a general growth year over year that is projected for the forecast year 1 of I think that says 8%? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Of 2.8%. That, again, includes the property tax plus all of the other revenue that is in there. On the operating expense side, we have a 5.7 overall growth in personnel, materials and services, and capital outlay. Those are the 3 expense groupings that make up the operating expense. That gets us to a net operating income of $4.3 million in the positive. So when Gary talks about a sustainable budget, what he's saying is our net operating income is positive. We're not in a deficit position. If we were in a deficit position, we would be recommending cuts. But this is not what we have. The the instructions that we built the budget on were sound enough that it netted a positive net operating income. So that is what we have before we have the special projects, which we throw below the line so that we can very clearly call out whether we have a sustainable budget or we have issues. So now below the line, Some of the projects that we know of today are relocating the behavioral health clinic. That is in partnership with the new courthouse project, which we all understand is still up for discussion, but this forecast is a planning tool. So it's not set in stone. The board will still be able to make those decisions. But what we're trying to do is give a tool that you can use to make financial decisions for the long term. So then we've got some of the other capital projects. Some of those are just year-over-year maintenance, large maintenance projects that need to be done for the benefit of the entire organization and our facilities. We also have the road improvement, again, also part of the courthouse project. We have the courthouse project itself. So those are our consultants telling us how much we will need for next year. And then we have the library buildings, Gladstone and Oak Lodge, that we have put in as a $9 million placeholder in year one. That gets us to a negative ending balance of revenue less expenses of negative 15 million. So the plan, and this is before you all got here, but the plan was that we would make reductions over the course of the next 3 years to forecast out. And we knew that if we could make those reductions in the base amount, that would be sustainable enough to, over the long haul, through 2049-50, to get us to an ending balance that allowed us to live within our means and still maintain reserves and contingency at the policy levels. So for the rest of the Budget Committee members who've had a chance to look at past forecasts, the general message is that the instructions, the framework of the 22-23 budget has been met. We have a balanced budget. It is sustainable. We did have to make some cuts that were planned based on the forecast that we showed you in January. That forecast had roughly 4.8 million in reductions that were needed. We've made some of those reductions permanently, and most of that goal is being met with one-time reductions. So at that, I want to pause and allow you to ask any questions. And apologies for going so fast, but I'm trying to get a lot in a short amount of time.
Thank you for that, Sandra. Do any of the Budget Committee members have questions at this point before we continue on what's been presented on the forecast? Note at the bottom of the page, there is, yes, you, Paul, a box, budget assumptions, and I think those are important to take a look at moving forward. We have a CPI growth of 2.6 beginning in year one, and this budget also includes a 4.5% COLA for fiscal year 22-23, and so those are real pressures and have real live budget implications moving forward. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Sandra, going back to your discussion there about the 14.7 negative there and the one-time cuts, is there a plan or a strategy to make some cuts that would be ongoing, that would survive? Going ahead, just looking across the board here, you know, we got parents across the board in years ahead. So what can we do long-term to where it's not one time? You know, one-time cuts are nice, but what can we do long-term? Is there a path?
So we are taking a look at those, and this year one was where we started to look at what are some of the reductions that were sustainable and could be flowed through. We will call those out in the Budget Committee meeting in May, and I'll probably have a table for you so that you could very clearly see what the ongoing reductions are versus the one-time.
Okay. Any other discussion so far? Okay, Gary, go ahead. Or Sandra.
Okay. So the rest of the packet is all just routine items. It is full-time equivalent vacancy savings, overtime, and I think we have one more, and I'm trying to think through. Oh, budget versus actual FTE counts. So those are all in your packet. And we also have in there for you, and then this is a response to past requests, but it's supplemental budgets that have been going before the board. This budget committee was not receiving those in the past, and so we've put them in there just as information for the budget committee.
Okay, I have some questions regarding Exhibit F, which is the actual versus budget. H3S, an addition of 34.8 FTE. Can somebody address that for me? How that's being paid for? Are those permanent or temporary positions?
Yes, I'll answer that. So some of those positions are with the Housing Authority with the Supportive Housing Services funds from Metro. Some of those are temporary positions using ARPA funds that the county commissioners have already authorized for public health, for example. Some of those are permanent positions with federal or state ARPA dollars. That's not your part of the ARPA dollars, but that came through a federal grant or program from the feds. None of those are general fund. These are all
I
funded.
did not think so, but at the budget meeting, Gary, can you list those out for us?
Yes.
Because it really increased our overall FTE by a lot. What's going on here? Do we want to take time now to address any of the additional FTE? I know we had some departments request. The district attorney has requested 6 additional FTE. The sheriff, let's see, where is the sheriff's? Has 2 additional. Human Resources has 2 additional. Are those paid out of the general fund?
Some are. So the sheriff's office, those 2 were paid from the general fund. Human Resources, yes, those were paid from the general fund. The district attorney, yes, from the general fund. Others not. BCS, no. CCOM, no. I'm just quickly going through the list. Actually, that's it. The others would be paid from the general fund, yes.
Okay, and obviously, there's been adjustments made to allow for the roll-up, because those are loaded positions, of course. It's just not salary, but that's fine, if that's what we can do. Are there any more comments based on the actual versus budget in Exhibit F?
I do have one question.
Go ahead.
And maybe it's not clear. Gary, what will be our FTE count for this new budget compared to last year?
I don't have for the proposed budget, I don't have the final number yet, but it's going to be higher. But it's because of all this extra infusion of federal and state funds we've received. It's very little general fund increased positions, mostly funding from ARPA, CARES Act, other external sources, many of which are one-time only funding, which means when the funding ends, the positions end. I've been very clear with departments about that. There's no backfilling, and we're tracking them, so we can keep track of the FTEs that are funded externally. When those funding streams end, then the positions end.
Sandra, I'm looking at Exhibit F, and there's a total FTE count on the bottom of these columns. Fiscal year 22 adopted budget FTE total is 2290. And then we move over to the actuals. I believe it's a roll-up. Increases it to 2,343. Is that correct? Would that be the answer to Commissioner Savis's question?
So throughout the fiscal year 21-22 year, positions have been added. So the total count for FTEs filled and vacant is the 2,343.6 that you see on this
Okay.
table.
All righty. Good. Wilda?
Yes, just wondered, and I think I know the answer already, but I just want to get it out there. When we have the discussions about FTE during the budget deliberations, will we be able to know and understand the difference between general fund impact and these are special one-off, short-term, paid by somebody else, whatever kinds of impacts? Because with this list, of course, we don't know that offhand, so.
Yes, we can gather that data for you. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, so my follow-up, going back to this, so I see under the total at the top of that attachment F where it says actuals as of 1/31/22, right? But obviously, change versus budget, that's new for 2022-23, right?
Yes, so those will be built into the base of 22, 23. It'll be a 21, 22 number. And then you'll have recommendations that we're making for new positions in 22, 23 as well.
Right, so in a future sheet, it'd be nice to have that separated out as 22-23 versus under 131 actual. And the other thing I would add, Gary, it'd be nice to actually see what's temporary or ARPA and have that new added amount broken out so we know what the permanent change suggested, I won't say permanent, but as permanent, the budgeted new permanent positions, if you will, versus the temporary positions and whatever other detail you
You
mentioned.
could do that, yes.
Okay, thank you. And next sheet?
Please, can you roll forward to the next one?
Are we going to talk about vacancy salary, savings, and attachment G?
Okay?
Thank you. Oh, yeah, here we go. Go ahead, Sandra.
Okay, so this page just shows the salary savings. It is an estimate of salary savings, and it's by department. So it doesn't speak to what fund a department is in, and some funds, or some departments have multiple funds that they're in. But this just does it at the department level, and it converts it into a rate. So it says, what is the percentage rate, and then what is the salary savings estimated to date? And that is the breakdown that you've got. And so far, through January 31st, we have approximately 11.8 million in salary savings due to vacancies.
Okay, I'm a little confused. That 11.8 million, has that been added back into the budget that we're going to be presented?
So you would see it as a fund balance number in 21, 22. And if, in the general,
Okay, yeah, Elizabeth?
Yeah, those are unspent dollars, so you
Okay.
won't see those in actual year-to-date.
Okay, so we don't see that, do we see that in our forecast? We don't see that here, correct?
It's part of the beginning balance that's proposed for the 22-23, because that will just be additional, that'll be revenue that was not spent. So it'll be in the carryover.
I see,
to your
okay.
beginning balance.
Okay, all righty.
Madam, yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
I see you.
Thank you, thank you. My curiosity would be, I see we've got, 11,700,000 and change in savings for vacancies, but how is that offset by overtime in an accumulative manner? We have it month by month from before, but we don't have a cumulative number. I would be interested in how that balances each out.
okay? And that is an absolute great question and follow-up, because this is salary savings, but there is a cost in overtime. Sometimes it's contracted services. So if you have a vacancy, if a department has a vacancy, they might hire through a temp agency for the work to be done. And so this number reflects the salary savings, but not the net cost.
Right, yeah.
Okay, Gary, what's happening in the departments with their vacant positions?
Yes, so our vacancy rate is higher than normal. Normal, it's around 6 or 7%. As of January, it's 12%, which is higher, which is the labor shortage the whole world's going through right now. Our HR department has the most open recruitments at any time ever in our history. Right now, it's 37. We had a high of 45 a few months ago. So our staff's working as quickly as possible in HR to get through as many recruitments as we can, but we're behind. But we're doing our best to fill all the vacancies. We'll never be at 100% full seats, ever, because people are always retiring, moving on to new positions. But the vacancy rate is higher than it normally is, which I feel is standard across the board with any public or private sector. But we're working as fast as we can to fill the vacancies.
Go ahead.
It would seem to me that in many cases, it's going to cost us less to hire new people than it is to pay the overtime that's accumulated in some of the departments. So I appreciate that they're working very diligently on that. And I also appreciate that I know what the labor force is like today and how many jobs are going lacking for people to come in, and yet, unemployment is what it is. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. So thank you for the diligence on that.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I have a question on this chart. If I go to the very bottom, I just look at Health, Housing, Human Services, and you got it says salary savings, so 3.5 million approximately. And then I go on the previous page, and it says there's 109 vacancies. And if I divide that, I come out to $32,000, which I don't think there's any positions that are really that low. So why the discrepancy on, if I divide 3.558555 divided by 109, I come out to $32,647.
Really going to be just a matter of timing. So we, if the vacancies came about just a couple months prior, we're only building in, 2 months worth of vacancy savings into kind of that total.
Okay, I was just wondering if those were overages in other areas that amounted to, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I appreciate your explanation.
So it's basically timing. It's not necessarily saying whatever the vacant positions are, assuming that those were, 12 months worth of savings. It's more so
Snapshot.
true savings, a snapshot, yeah.
Yeah, because if I just do the overall number, and by the total of all these lines, it's still a really low number.
I think that makes
I don't know if that's
sense.
an anomaly, but I'd just like to know. Maybe just kind of dive in each one of those a little bit further at some point in the future. It'd be nice to know if there's a situation where the timing, the pay is commensurate with the salaries, the calculation's commensurate with the vacancies.
Gotcha.
And the only time that would work out mathematically is if the vacancy was vacant the entire year. Because then you'd have the entire, or up through that point, up through January, you'd have 7 months of savings. But in most of these cases, the vacancies, adjust. You can have one position filled one day, next month it's vacant, and you'll only have a partial savings there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further questions on these two attachments? Go ahead.
Okay. Scroll through. So, Chair, I'm prepared to stop there. The remainder.
I do want to address the next attachment on overtime costs. And there are certain departments that have more overtime than others, and it's somewhat self-explanatory, for instance, CCOM and the Sheriff's Department. So I want to know, Gary, I want those two agencies to be able to come before us and address the justification for their overtime and why that occurs.
Okay?
Okay,
Yes.
because that is a huge driver. The vacancy rate in, for instance, the Sheriff's Department, I know the sheriff has unfilled vacancies. If those were filled, then their overtime costs wouldn't be as high, correct?
That would make sense, yes.
Yes, so I want to know what the justification is and what they're doing about it to alleviate their overtime costs. And it needs to be a real program. Just not aspirational.
Will do.
Thank you very much. Commissioners and Gary and Budget Committee members, do we have any other questions on the materials that have been presented to us today? Do we have questions on the procedure when we meet in our full Budget Committee meeting starting at the end of May? Gary, you want to explain that?
Yes. So first, quickly, so I've been working with department directors for the last 6 months, along with the budget team, to prepare for you a proposed budget. And that work is almost done, although I just made a few changes yesterday. But we're preparing to give to you a proposed budget in 3 weeks, which will be 2 weeks before your Budget Committee meetings the last week in May. And I've made these recommendations to you, and I'll talk about all this when we meet, but They're entirely based off this, the Board of County Commissioners, Strategic Performance Clackamas, Strategic Plan, 5 main priorities. That is what I based your budget off of. And I know all of you commissioners and what your personal interests and priorities are. I've tried to put it all together with my best judgment as your budget officer of what meets your priorities. Then I will hand you this document, and then it's entirely up to you as a budget committee. If you accept, reject, want to make changes, that's where you'll do your deliberations during that entire week of May 23rd. So with that, for those of you who've been through this before, either as a staff member or a participant, if not, I'll tell you, we have almost a whole week. Monday, May 23rd will be Special District Day, so that actually is not you, but it's the other Special District Budget Committees. It does include you, commissioners. You'll do that most of the morning on Monday, May 23rd, and then you as the Budget Committee will start meeting Tuesday, May 24th, Wednesday, May 25th, Thursday, May 26th. If you're not done, we'll do Friday, May 27th. But you will hear presentations from departments, and myself and Elizabeth will present to you the budget of the county, and then you ask questions, delve into as much detail as you want, and then the goal is by the end of your deliberations, you are recommending a proposed budget to the Board of County Commissioners. They then make the final decision in June at one of their business meetings. So that's a really high level of what's about to happen. But your work, this is just setting the table for the work you're about to do. There's nothing more for you to do until 2 weeks from now when you get your huge binder or online, whatever version you prefer to read this material. And then really look at all the stuff we've given to you. And then on Tuesday, May 24th is when you'll start your discussions.
The binders are very helpful.
Yes.
Yes, even this 42-page document, I printed out about half of it because it's just easier for me to understand the numbers, and you guys are shaking your heads too. Thank you for that. Any other comments from the Budget Committee members? Seeing none, I believe this session is adjourned. Thank you.